Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. It's Sunday, and as good old JR says, you know what that means. So we are live. This is ATW, All Things Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Twist, joined by Miss. What's up? How you doing?
Good morning. Happy Sunday. Oh my God.
You feeling better? You had to take a little hit before we went live.
Yes, I did. I was kind of like rushing this morning, doing a couple things. So I was like, let me calm down a little bit. So I had to take it.
Well, good to see you. We've been off the air for a couple weeks. Last weekend was Easter, so we did not have a show. But over the last couple weeks, a lot of things have gone down. WWE, AEW, all things wrestling. That's what we're here to talk about. All things wrestling podcast. Good morning, good afternoon, and today we have on pro wrestling announcer Sammy Kiss out of Wildcat Sports. And Sammy was on our show last year. He was one of our early guests. So Sammy is officially our first, and this is a homage to Booker T. He is our first two-time guest. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring Sammy in. Sammy, good morning.
Good morning. How you guys doing?
Good, man. Or should I say good afternoon?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Thank you guys for having me back. I had a blast the last time. I know that I talked y'all's ear off. You know, I could talk about wrestling nonstop all day, every day. So it's great to be back. Looking forward to talking about all things wrestling.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, we loved having you on the first time, and last time you were in your car. So this time it looks like a little more relaxed setting where you're at.
Yeah, I'm actually able to be here from home after. So WrestleMania was in Texas. So all of the promotions that I primarily have been working with for the last year, all were running events during that same weekend. So it kind of threw the usual schedule for most of those promotions off. So things kind of got changed up. Once May hits, things will get back to more of the normal schedule that most of the places I work with go into. So I actually had a very rare weekend off, which was very nice. I got to spend some time with the wife and kids, and got a chance to come on here with you guys. So.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, man. So yeah, I mean, want to hear about the whole experience. We had on a couple weeks ago. I don't know if you're familiar with Matt Davis. They have a podcast, Lockup Podcast. He does with Taryn Terrell from NWA. They have a new podcast, and they were at WrestleCon. They were interviewing all kinds of people. WrestleCon was just a massive event. I mean, that whole week of WrestleMania, and I was actually in Texas for work for my regular job that week, and all the hotels were packed. There was just people everywhere. It was like the mecca of wrestling that week was there in Texas. So tell us all about it, man, your experience with WrestleCon.
Man. I mean, WrestleCon has become such a huge thing. I remember when WrestleMania 30 came to New Orleans. I was really excited about all the different kind of indie promotions that might be coming along with it, because I always was excited, because most things don't come to New Orleans over the last few years, which was a big thing with Wildcat, but not. So I went to a few of those shows, and there was maybe like 20, 30 people at like a spatter, maybe 2 or 3 independent shows at WrestleMania 30. Right. And then fast forward to WrestleMania 38 just a few weeks ago, and I mean, shows were running on Wednesday.
Right.
And then talk about, there was, I think, maybe 200 shows. I'm not kidding, like running between Wednesday all the way through Sunday. It was insanity. Like there was like 4 or 5 shows running concurrently the entire weekend for that entire week. It's not even WrestleMania weekend anymore. It's WrestleMania week. So it was a lot to keep up with.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, it was GCW. I mean, there were just so many organizations there.
I mean, it was one of those things of, I think it kind of went beyond capacity. I know that there was maybe a dozen or so shows that had to pull out. Reality of Wrestling, Booker T's promotion in school, they were going to be running a show at a venue with a few other promotions throughout that whole weekend, that ended up kind of falling through, and they had to cancel their events, which was a big disappointment for me, because I was set to work most of those events. I was already going to be there for a few other shows as well, but it gave me the opportunity to go kind of enjoy the weekend, go see WrestleCon, catch up with a bunch of colleagues and peers while I was there as well, not just work the whole time, which was
Right.
really great because it's just a nonstop thing, you know.
Yeah,
I was talking to one of the announcers, Brittany, who was talking about how when you're booking shows, like there's shows running at 9 a.m. all the way through midnight, and if you're a wrestler, you can wrestle like the first match and then go in the locker room, change, and go to the next show. But it's harder for people like me, who's like an announcer or a commentator. You have to stay for that entire thing. You can't leave in the middle of it.
Right.
So then the second that's over, if you have another booking across town, you have to wrap up really quickly and go all the way over there. So it was a very, very hectic weekend. Not a lot of sleep, a lot of energy drinks, a lot of Red Bull and Bang discussion the entire time. But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
How long does it take to recover from that week, man?
It's weird. Like, well, there's a sentiment to not. You shouldn't complain. I mean, we all signed up for this. Ideally, this is what you want, right? It's a blessing to be able to go to WrestleCon and be. There are a lot of people, the wrestlers, that are there just to, sell merchandise at the WrestleCon convention. Not everybody's even on the shows, so to be able to be lucky enough to work at different events, things like that. Everyone's that whole like I'm not complaining because this is what you signed up for. But it's so irregular. Like it's very, very rare for that much wrestling to be going on in one single town in one single weekend. Like even compared to the last few years. I mean, the pandemic kind of put a big kibosh on that the last couple of years. I know that a few promotions ran last year, and then obviously the year before during WrestleMania there was nobody doing anything. So it was kind of like the first big WrestleMania weekend where everyone was actually out and about, and I think people overjudged exactly how insane it was going to be. So I don't know how. I think I'm still recovering, to be honest,
Right.
is the truth. But once I said like April's a thing where a lot of promotions kind of like we did it, we crammed, we did multiple shows, and then they kind of took a few weeks off for April to kind of get their bearings, get things back together before getting back to normal in May.
Well, next year it's going to be in Liz's neck of the woods in Los Angeles. So she's like, she's already ready for next year, right? WrestleCon, the whole everything, WrestleMania. I mean, that's going to be nuts.
I'm excited. I'm already ready to take like a week and a half off. So
yeah,
I'm excited for WrestleMania to come out here. But I mean, seeing the crazy hectic schedule, how did you prepare for all of that? I mean, I'm pretty sure you knew in advance what shows you were be going to, but how did you prepare in advance to know how your schedule is just going to work, like knowing that how hectic it was going to be?
Yeah, I mean, the wrestling business is so touch and go that even when you do have things lined up months and months in advance, you kind of take it with a grain of salt because you never know how things are going to go, especially with the pandemic. I know when Wildcat was running shows, we had plans for one thing, and then it fell through because COVID restrictions changed. And then when you're in the South, we've had a really bad hurricane season the last few years. That last year, a lot of stuff in Louisiana got canceled. The year before, it really hit a lot of stuff in Southeast Texas where they had to cancel a lot of stuff too. So you really never know that you kind of, I think sometimes people overdo it because there's an assumption that things are going to get taken away from you. And that's what I ended up doing. It ended up working out, which is really great. But you kind of just tell yourself that the opportunity is there to just do as much as you possibly can, network as much as you can, and you just kind of go on. No sleep is truth. I mean, like, I don't think I slept for 5 days, which seems impossible, but it's what you have to do. Like, you have that, that ambition and that sense of responsibility that when you say you're going to do something, you got to commit to it, regardless of how worn out or beat up you are, So I think everyone that weekend, myself included, overextended themselves, but it was a lot of fun. It was one of those things of, I remember a lot of people comment like, I'm having fun. I don't feel like I'm having fun, but I know that I am, that kind of thing, And there's people from all over the world there, like stuff on Rev Pro and Progress, and guys from New Japan, and people from all across the country. Like, it wasn't just Texas promotions. It's literally everybody. You mentioned Game Changer had stuff going on that entire weekend. So that kind of high of that energy that everyone was there kind of lent for everybody to kind of lean on each other and kind of ride that energy wave together. Now, what happened with everybody after that, that's on them,
Right.
especially like when you're not touring all the time, but it was one of those things where you kind of just have to go, this is what we're going to do. It's one weekend, we can make it done. Ideally, you would love that to happen every weekend. Like, it would be great if you could do a WrestleCon every weekend, but, one day maybe.
One day, hopefully. But did it go by? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. Hey, so Sammy, I know you were saying, after COVID and all that, it's like the first big real wrestling event in a few years.
Yeah.
Being in the business and kind of working alongside with Booker T, who I'm sure he's probably an awesome guy. Like, in real life, I've been a huge Booker T fan for forever.
Oh, yeah.
He's awesome. Is there anybody that you met or that you ran into that week that, like, just being a wrestling fan, like, was there anyone that you met and you're like, oh my God, like, this is so awesome to meet this person? Or was there multiple people? Who did you run into, or who were you hoping you would run into there during that week?
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned Booker T, and as a note, I would like to say that Booker T, the person that he comes off as on television, is exactly what he's like when you're talking to him in person, which is incredible. Reality of wrestling, his wrestling school, they were supposed to be doing a lot of shows that weekend, but then they got canceled. So a lot of those guys that were booked on those shows didn't take things elsewhere because they were working those shows. So I was first and foremost trying to hope that those guys were going to get plugged into different places, stuff like that, because they have so many talented guys there, like Ryan Davidson, Jay Alexander, Promise Braxton. The list goes on and on and on. Mysterious Q, Brian Keith. There are a few guys that are like becoming really, really big in the Texas area. Brian Keith and Mysterious Q particularly, but they worked with me with New Texas Pro pretty regularly, so I knew that I was going to get to see them.
Right.
But for me, because I was at WrestleCade in North Carolina a few months ago, and I'm in Texas a lot now, I was most excited to see the kind of out of country guys because they're not here very often.
Right.
So I got to meet and talk with Minoru Suzuki and Tomohiro Ishii and Jushin Thunder Liger, like guys like that.
Oh wow,
who,
that's huge.
To me, like, you get a little not jaded to the business, but you have to be professional when you're,
Absolutely.
in the wrestling business. You want to treat everyone like they're the same. And when you meet wrestlers all the time, even though we all love this business, you get the sense of like you're not supposed to really be a fan anymore. Right. But for whatever reason, I think it's because it's a different culture and it's a different country. It's all the way. I'm still able to kind of hold that reverence about Japanese performers for whatever reason. But then when I meet them, I still feel that kind of giddy sense of like, oh, like, that's Jushin Thunder Liger, that kind of thing. So, and I would, you'd be professional there, but like on the inside, it's like, this is pretty awesome.
Definitely.
Jushin Thunder Liger, Liz probably doesn't know who that is, but that's from back in the day. And this guy is maybe hands down one of the greatest wrestlers to ever come out of Japan. He had a short stint in WCW for a minute. But man, that would have been amazing to meet someone like him.
He was in the first episode of Monday Nitro. I believe he's in the first match. It's him and Flying Brian Pillman. So the first episode of Nitro opens with him. So he's been doing it for a long time. He retired a couple of years ago, but he still makes appearances and stuff like that. And that language boundary is there too, because I was there with Title Match Network doing interviews with different people, and I was trying to do some stuff with some of the New Japan guys, but there's that language boundary where it's hard to do an interview with those guys. I remember a few years ago, it was a WrestleMania 34 weekend. Wildcat Sports was working with the WrestleCon convention in New Orleans. And so we were doing our show, and then the WrestleCon Super Show was coming on right after us. So everyone that was on the WrestleCon show was in the Wildcat locker room ahead of the show. And I'm backstage, I run into Kota Ibushi. I'm like, oh, hey, and I just start kind of chatting him up, not even thinking that like he might not understand what I'm saying.
Right.
So I'm asking him like, hey, like, welcome to New Orleans. Like, like, are you good? Like, do you need anything? Like, were you able to like see this? Because when you come to town, like, I mean, I was in Dallas for a week, And I barely saw anything in Dallas because I was busy doing other stuff.
Right.
So I was asking him like if he was able to see New Orleans, stuff like that. And I'm realizing as I'm saying it that he doesn't understand anything that I'm saying. And there's someone next to him that starts interpreting for him. So I go, okay, so someone's explaining it to him, kind of thing. So then I just start talking to this guy who's interpreting, his interpreter or whatever. And the guy, I say, like, how are you doing? Are you enjoying New Orleans? The guy says it in Japanese, Kotobushi. Kotobushi responds. He tells me in English. This goes back and forth, maybe 4 or 5 different things. And after that, I start to realize the person who's interpreting him is Kenny Omega.
Oh,
and I didn't even acknowledge it.
wow.
And then once I realized it was him, it felt weird to suddenly be like, oh, sorry, like, you know, kind of thing. So I just kept like talking to him about it, and then it was over. And I was like, I wonder how he felt about that. I was like, this guy doesn't even like what the hell, man? Like, you know, so it was just the strangest experience. Is like I remember someone was like, you met Kenny Omega? I was like, yeah, kind of. Like, not really. Like, you know,
he was
like,
interpreting.
You know,
like,
yeah, you know. So
that.
it was really weird, you know. But that was a lot of fun, and a lot of the New Japan guys were there that weekend as well. But again, they're getting ready for a show. I'm working another show, so you kind of have to do the hi, bye, shake hands kind of thing. And you don't really get time to talk to them because they're working on the show. And that's what's nice about these wrestling conventions is that even though people are there and it's still working, like there are people doing interviews and there are people doing different things, but when people are at their booths and stuff like that, it's all these wrestlers all in one room from all these different promotions from all over the world. And they're essentially all just kind of hanging out. So it's really cool to see everyone be able to just kind of go and just talk to each other. And you have this opportunity to just actually hang out and talk with the wrestlers, you know, because no one's like, you know, getting ready for a match or getting ready for a promo or anything like that. You're able to, there's a real kind of relaxed vibe to be able to just, like, it's great for the fans to be able to come and meet the wrestlers, but personally, I think it's even better for the wrestlers get to come and meet the other wrestlers. Like, there are people there from WWE and AEW and, you know, Impact Wrestling, Ring of Honor, and a lot of them, you know, don't even get to see each other that often, but they're all there in one building. You can see them all hanging out, you know, finally able to catch up and discuss things. So that was really weird and surreal. And so be able to talk to guys like Suzuki and Liger and be able to actually be a one-on-one with, regardless of the language barrier, to be able to just kind of not hi and bye, but to actually have a moment and really kind of be there with these people in the industry was really great.
Now, being that you're in the industry, does a part of you wish that you could be there as a fan to enjoy it?
Oh, yeah.
Or does you feel like
weird.
you're on this side of it, you can't really enjoy it maybe as much as you want to? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a weird, and I'm not a wrestler, so I have a little bit more latitude on that. You know, when you're a wrestler, that you have to do so much to make it in this business that you almost have to put that away because there's no time for that. You know, there's that grind, that hustle. Not that there isn't that with my position either. I mean, if anything, you know, if there's a promotion that needs a wrestler, that's maybe 16, 17 spots. But if they have 2 commentators, they have 1 announcer, like it's fewer and far between to find openings for those kinds of things.
Right.
So you do need to still hustle for those kinds of opportunities. But that business aspect, you know, I always assume, even though it's not true for everybody, that you have to have a passion for professional wrestling to get involved in professional wrestling. Because in my opinion, if you don't, why are you involved in this? Because it's so crazy and so hectic, and it can be, you know, there's a lot of horror stories and a lot of negative aspects to it that people oversee and ignore and kind of get past because of that love that we all have for it, which is what's so great about it, that everyone in the community shares that love for it. That I think you're always a fan because of that. But personally, I don't even know if I'm capable of watching wrestling in that manner anymore. If I'm watching a match at home, I'm critiquing it. I'm thinking about the Wildcat school I work with and what the students would be getting from that match if they were watching it. I'm thinking about what I would say if I were doing commentary on it. I'm thinking about, you know, what efforts the wrestlers, them, you know, and I try to stop myself from doing that. And then when I'm at shows, like during WrestleCade weekend, because I did have a little bit of free time, and I would go to the shows just to watch. But the entire time I'm there, I'm just thinking like, I'm thinking about who's here, who should I go to talk about things with.
Right. Well, I saw that you did go to actually WrestleMania, so
yes, I was able to go to WrestleMania, which was, and that was part of it, is that when you're at WrestleCade and you're working with everybody, it feels like you're kind of always at work the whole time, even if you're just watching the show. And I did enjoy a lot of the shows. That the thought was, well, WrestleMania is such a spectacle. I know that I know a few people that have complained about they wouldn't want to go unless they were on the front row and things like, because you can't see because it's so far away.
Right.
And I always try to explain, I was like, that is not what it's about. If you've never been to WrestleMania, that's the kind of thing you say if you've never been to WrestleMania, because WrestleMania is about just being there and being that atmosphere. Like if you think about any WrestleMania, great WrestleMania you've seen, like WrestleMania 17, WrestleMania 3, like imagine being like going back in time. There's like, we're gonna give you a ticket, but you're gonna be behind the Tron, way at the top, and you'll be like, yeah, but I'll be there. Like I would love to go to that, just to be in the building and be part of the atmosphere. It doesn't matter how well you can see Hogan versus Andre, or how well you can see Austin versus Rock or whatever. It's just about being there, and that's what's so great about WrestleMania, is that it's less about wrestling, and it's more about the atmosphere and that love and passion that comes with this kind of celebration of wrestling. So I was one of those things where I was able to have the time to go do it, which I wasn't originally. I was originally booked during that show, but then when some of the shows fell through, I was like, okay, well, I'm here, might as well go see the show, which ended up being a little bit of a stressor for me, because I was working a midnight show after WrestleMania on night one. So I had to leave immediately after the show so I could make it to my booking. And the show went so much longer than I thought it was going to. I mean, it wasn't long compared to WrestleMania 35. That one was like, 8 hours long? Yeah. It was only 4 hours long, but I was hoping it was going to be three and a half. So I'm there and I'm watching. And when Kevin Owens comes out, I'm thinking, man, if this is just a talk show, I could probably, he'll stunner him, leave him. I was like, it feels like it's not going to be that. So then when he announces it's going to be a match, I'm like, well, now I have to stay. I have to watch this, So the whole time I'm enjoying Stone Cold's beating him, but I'm also like, let's wrap this up. So I got to get out of here. So the second he stunnered him and pinned him, I was like, that's awesome. I turned around and I left because I had to go. It was only a mile away. New Texas Pro and Texas Mania was running events near AT&T Stadium, and they do that the last few times that WrestleMania was in the area. So that the idea being, if you wanted extra wrestling, you're high on wrestling, you're feeling, you can leave that show and go watch more wrestling, which was really awesome. We had guys like Davey Richards and Minoru Suzuki versus Barrett Brown on after night 2, but New Texas Pro on Saturday was a great, but it was one of those things where I was so I'm puffing and puffing to go from one venue to the next. So it was fun, but again, my mind is on the next thing that I'm working. I'm not really able to kind of settle into it and really enjoy it because my mind is always on the next thing,
Yeah, and talking about the next thing, I know you were telling us a little bit about Wildcats coming back.
Yes, yeah.
A little bit about that.
Yeah, so Wildcat Sports, we've been around for about 10 years. We're really the only wrestling school in New Orleans. There's a lot of differences between professional wrestling in Louisiana than most states. We have a state athletic commission in Louisiana, which you have to have a license. And you have to pay certain fees and dues and qualify in certain areas to be legally allowed to run professional wrestling in the state of Louisiana. There's a very high standard for what you're allowed to practice in the state. It's why there's so much blowing up in Florida and Texas and California. There's certain states where there's lots of professional wrestling, and a lot of those places have very good, high quality wrestling. But there's also some of the lower tier promotions as well that don't have the same quality of demand for what they expect the promotion to kind of provide. Like there are guys that are untrained that get to do shows, like, and everyone knows it. Like there's always like those backyard shows, stuff like that. None of that's allowed in Louisiana.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Wildcat Sports, the idea was to bring professional wrestling back to the state, but then because of those regulations, when the pandemic hit, we were kind of put on the whole like, you guys got to wait until we let you. So whether we want to come back or not, or whether everybody else has come back or not, we have to wait until we get the okay from the state to be able to do anything. And then last summer, once we were able to finally do that, Hurricane Ida happened, and we lost a few buildings, we lost some venues. It was really tough on the city. So that compounded with the COVID thing, it took some time to shuffle some stuff around. But finally, after much anticipation, we're finally coming back on June 25th in Jefferson, which is just south of New Orleans, with our first show back since last summer.
Awesome. Exciting.
Yeah, it's great. And it's our X-rated event too. We're going to be doing another family-friendly show. We're a very family-friendly oriented company. We try to have shows where anybody can kind of come, but our summer tradition, we have one show called X-rated, which is for kind of more adult themed, especially for people to come, they can drink and they can just enjoy wrestling without that kind of thing. Yeah. And and we always usually do that during the summer. So now once we got the go ahead to finally start doing shows, the idea was like, okay, well, one of our most popular shows is X-rated, and it's disappointing to some of the our fans because they want to bring their family, stuff like that, and we're just like, we're bringing that back too, and that announcement's probably going to come soon. But our first one's X-rated, which I'm very excited about, because all the boys in the locker room love that show because you can kind of be loose. There's less restrictions on being PG, all those kinds of things that people can kind of go balls to the wall, so to speak. It's a completely different atmosphere.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. Even as a fan, just sitting in the stands from a PG show to something more core, it's completely different vibe. Completely different.
Yeah,
vibe.
I mean, there's a like when you're at a WWE show, there's so many families there that I know a few people that they would go, and even if they do, have a few drinks and they try to kind of get rowdy, it's a little awkward if you're doing that and there's like a couple of kids, next to you. Like it's like, okay, well, it kind of makes you feel like I gotta, tone it down a little bit. So the idea is like to have an environment where you don't have to worry about that sort of thing. And I know there are a lot of promotions that, go on that specific theme. Like, I don't think anybody goes to Bloodsport or Game Changer or certain promotions expecting that sense of family-friendly atmosphere. You can bring your kids to them, I'm sure, but like you got to know what you're in for. It's I know that I was at I think it was Bo Burnham. I went to one of his specials and there was like a dad and his kid in the front row, and he kind of pointed them out and was like, okay, just so you know, like I'm doing my sets like the way they were going to be, and that's the thing is that, you kind of have to know what you're getting into. And that's what's so great and interesting about wrestling is that, if you don't know anything about it, you kind of assume that what you see is what it's all like, but it's just like any other medium. There's so many different facets and genres and different presentations that just because professional wrestling is on the marquee doesn't mean necessarily what you're getting yourself in for, kind of thing. That's what why we try to brand X-Rated as Wildcat, because we've done such a strong effort to brand ourselves as family friendly that we have to kind of make a point to go like, this one is not that. Not just to attract people for that, but to not alienate our fans who do want to be able to come with their kids and have fun.
Absolutely.
So we try to do something for everybody.
So Sammy, do we got any kind of a lineup yet for that show at the end of June, or is it not really?
Well, we
up in there right now who's going to be there?
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where we do that old school, like, we let things come out, as so we got some big names that we haven't announced yet, so I won't give them away just yet, but we did.
Can we say for the show, exclusive here, man? Come on. Not one.
I will say that former NWA champion Trevor Murdoch is going to be at the show. He's challenged Ryan Davidson to a match, so that's going to be really great because Trevor Murdoch's the guy that beat Nick Aldis, the man that was champion for however many, 800 days, something ridiculous like that.
Easy.
So he was the first guy to beat that. And Ryan Davidson, he wrestles for New Texas Pro, he wrestles for Hurricane Pro, he wrestles for Reality of Wrestling, he wrestles for so many promotions in Texas that he's our Wildcat Sports Heavyweight champion. So even though we closed and weren't able to run shows during the pandemic for the last couple of years, he's been able to kind of carry our flag and represent Wildcat Sports in Texas, and has been, defending that championship, when people, challenge him for it during that time. So he's been champion for 2.5 years. So now that we're coming back, there's this expectation of like, okay. And some of our fans here are like, he's not really the longest reigning champion because he wasn't defending it here. He wants to kind of make a point to be like, hey, I've been defending this all over the place. It just wasn't here. And he would have if he could. We just weren't allowed to run shows. But there's also that aspect of, does that mean that we're going to get a change? Is there going to be a changing of the guard to kind of kick things off? And Trevor Murdoch's a guy who already is making a name for himself as someone who people kind of underestimate because he's someone that you look at and you might not think world champion. And I know that that's something that offends him because he's been working his ass off as one of the best, for a long time, to kind of prove those people wrong. So I know that he's got something to prove. Ryan's got something to prove. So I think, and then it's X-rated, and these are two big, heavy hitting, old school, Mid-South kind of guys that I'm expecting a kind of Bruiser Brody, Terry Gordy kind of slugfest. So it's going to be, I'm excited for that. And I
love Trevor Murdoch's look, man. To me, I'm 41 years old, so he reminds me, of an old school guy from the 70s or 80s, like Harley Race, or some of these guys that look like, they look like a regular guy, but they're definitely whooping your ass.
Dick Murdoch is like, he's got that shirt. It's like everybody's a tough guy till you get punched in the mouth, or everybody's a tough guy till you meet a real tough guy, And Trevor Murdoch is that guy. And Ryan Davidson's one of those guys who is the nicest, not to, I don't want to tarnish his image or anything like that, is maybe the nicest person I've ever met in this business is Ryan Davidson. So nice, so giving, so hardworking, but like anybody could approach him and he will be conversational. Wrestlers have a tendency to be very kind of standoffish. Ryan Davidson is someone who's always very approachable and very kind and willing to talk with you about basically anything. But he's also a 300-pound bear of a man. They call him the Texas Bear. So he's maybe 6'6", something like that. So he's a big guy. So it's going to be two guys, throwing each other around Southport in New Orleans. So I'm looking forward to that.
Damn.
So tell all our fans again when that's going to be. June what?
June 25th. It's going to be at Southport Hall in Jefferson, which is in New Orleans, Louisiana. Tickets are going on sale next Friday on April 29th. But it's going to be a limited seated event. Like, I'm not sure. I'm sure we're going to end up being a standing room only like kind of thing because people have been clamoring to get to the show. So I'm not sure how many front row seats we're going to be able to have, things like that. But we're going to cram as many fans as we legally can in that building. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Word legally.
Yeah. When WrestleCon came in 2018, they oversold their venue and they were getting issues from the fire marshal that they really couldn't have as many people as they were supposed to be in the building. So that was a whole big issue where they were kicking out wrestlers and they were kicking out all kinds of people trying to get as many fans in that building. It was this whole hullabaloo. So I know that there's a tendency of a stickler like to make sure that you don't have for safety reasons too many people in the building, but I imagine that we're going to do everything we can to have as many wrestling fans in there as possible, now that the mask mandates are gone and hopefully things are starting to return to normal, which is great.
Fingers crossed.
But when you're at X-rated, that's our event where alcohol's on hand at the time and fans get a little get a little, iffy, get a little crazy. We've had a few new students sign up since the pandemic started, and we've been trying to, make sure they know, like when we do the show, like you guys have to be aware that sometimes fans can get kind of crazy, because a lot of these kids, they've only gone to WWE shows, or they've only gone to things like they've never really seen how crazy a wrestling show like X-Rated or one of these bar shows, these shows where fans kind of can get involved. You've seen it at some of the shows recently where like fans, they jump the barricade, they try to run in the ring, they try to attack the wrestlers, which I don't know why anybody would do that in their right mind. But the point is that they're not in their right mind, so you kind of have to be on your T's and Q's. It's going to be a crazy night. I'm looking forward to see something crazy always happens, something weird always happens. So I'm curious as to what it'll be this time, but hopefully everything won't be. Hopefully the police will not get involved. Let's just put it that way.
Well, hey, with Wildcat coming back, sorry, Liz. Will we see Sammy Kiss take a bump? I mean, how far are we willing to go to get Wildcat out there?
It's I never say never. I'm not a wrestler. I'm not an in-ring performer, but I appreciate the fact that I've been able to work hard enough to get the respect of enough of my peers that that's not something that would be scoffed at to get involved in that in some kind of capacity. I personally feel like I don't deserve that, because I think wrestling is something that you have to earn the right to do. I think there are a lot of wrestling fans who feel that because they love wrestling that they should be able to be a wrestler. And I'm not saying that you can't. I think anybody who wants to be a wrestler can be a wrestler. But you have to put the work in, and you have to train properly to show respect to your peers. There's a thing with our school where we always say we will train you the right way. And there are a lot of students who come with us who don't graduate, who get very frustrated because it's taking too long, or it's too hard, or they're not on a wrestling show yet, or they're not, they want to be on AEW today, that kind of thing. And I more power to people that want to live their dream now. Like, they don't want to live their dream tomorrow, they want to live it now. But not everybody is made to be a wrestler. And I think there's a reality check that a lot of people have to have, that like you can do it, but you have to overcome a lot of what you need to be. And when you go to some of these wrestling promotions, and I've seen it a few places, that guys come in and you don't know if they know what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like I hate seeing reports that people are injured and it seems like the guy was being careless or making a foolish taking a foolish risk. When people talk about guys like Jeff Hardy or Darby Allin or guys like that, where they do these risks, like at least they are trained properly and they know what they're doing and they're taking a risk, and maybe you disagree with that risk, but it's risky in a controlled manner.
Exactly.
PJ Hawks, our Wildcat show from a couple years ago, he was the kid who jumped off the mall, that viral video of the guy jumping off the roof of the mall
a couple weeks ago.
And
I was like, why didn't they do that here? I'm like, for real, we have a mall that just like that right here.
Right? Yeah. Oh, and that was such a fun show. At the Esplanade Mall, it was a free show. Like, so it had crowds of people just in the mall going, like, we just set a ring up in the middle of the mall. And I was on commentary where PJ ran past me in the middle of that match. I thought that was very strange. And then I look up and he's, on the balcony. I'm like, But PJ, in addition to being, a Wildcat trained student, he was an amateur wrestler. He does film with his father, Luke Hawks, who runs Wildcat Sports. But he's a stuntman. Like, he's a professional stuntman. He's done stunts twice as high as that jump that he did. So it's not just that he did that, it's that he's someone who could do that and do it safely in a responsible way. And most people don't see that, they just see that moment. And that's the issue, is that as a fan, you don't know if that's just some guy that decided to jump off, or if he has had 7 or 8 years experience. And wrestling used to be a community where it was more closed off. And I mean, I love that we're able to kind of get to know wrestlers more than we ever have before. And, you know, Twitter and social media and you know, I think that that's all great. One of the costs of that is that now so many people think they know so much that they just go out and do it, even if they don't know everything they need to know. And I guess the point I was trying to say is that at Wildcat, we want to we try to instill that, like, you need to know the basics, be fundamentally sound, and be able to be safe, so that no matter where you wrestle in the world, if someone wrestles with you, they know that they can trust that you're not going to injure them, that you're safe, that they'll be safe.
Oh yeah.
And because of that, I feel like the guys that we have are on a level that not a lot of people have. Like, there are a lot of wrestling schools in the country, but there are only a few that I think are true, really great schools. I think Booker T School, without a doubt, is also one of them. You know, reality wrestling, because it's Booker T. Our school, Santino's Brothers in California, AML Wrestling in North Carolina, Seth Rollins' school. There are schools all over the country, but there are a lot of wrestlers that don't want to take the time to learn that. And I'm someone that's been around it, and I've seen it, and I help the coaches kind of, you know, and try to make sure that people understand what they're saying and help along with that. But as someone I'm not a wrestler, I try to make sure that I don't disrespect them by assuming that because I've been around this, that means that I can be a wrestler. So long story short, long story longer, I would love to get involved. If I do that, I want to make sure that I take the necessary steps to earn the right to be able to do that. Because I feel like that to be a wrestler, it's a privilege, that this is something that you have to earn. I know that's a cliche, you know, I'm saying so many cliches right now, but that you have to earn the right to be a wrestler, and that you can't earn it. Like, I don't mean that in a gatekeeping way of like, you can't earn it. Anybody can earn it. You just have to do the work to earn it. And I think people don't like that. They see guys, you know, there are people that can't do push-ups, and I hate push-ups. I don't know anybody that likes push-ups, right? But imagine seeing a wrestler and they're picking someone over their head, and then you find out, like, yeah, you know that guy, he can't do push-ups. Like, well, that doesn't seem safe, right? But it's also a thing where, like, I think people look at guys like Kevin Owens or look at Otis and they go, like, well, that guy, look at how that guy looks. I could be a wrestler. And it's like, Otis is like an Olympian, right? You know, he knows how to he works out. He might not look like he works out, but I guarantee you he works out. And anybody that has seen Kevin Owens wrestle, that thing where he just like is in the middle rope and he just jumps up to the top, and it's like, that guy he might feel like he needs to wear a t-shirt because he doesn't have a six-pack, but Kevin Owens is in shape, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not just about working out to visually look like a wrestler, even though I think people probably should do that as well. It's about being in shape so that you can protect yourself, protect other people, you know? Because I feel like there's far too many people. I know it's, you know, it's not ballet. People are always going to get injured, but there's no need for there to be injuries or people to be doing these stunts in a non-safe way. Like, it's just reckless stuff that's because you're not trained, you know? So I'm a big advocate for safety. If you take a bump, you should know how to do it, and not just because, you know, you're having fun. Like, I put a lot of respect on Bad Bunny, even though I don't like the presentation necessarily of the hottest performer coming out of WrestleMania last year was Bad Bunny. Like, it's like, I feel like, you know, I'd like that to be about other people that are on the promotion, you know.
But he wasn't.
But he did apparently train. Like he was at a wrestling thing like every weekend, like every week he was training and working out and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, that's what I like. That's awesome. Like, you know, because I don't know how many people did. Logan Paul this year. Like Logan Paul, I feel like was the best performer in his match at WrestleMania on Saturday, you know? Like he's got the facials, he's got the mannerisms, you know. He's bigger than Miz, and he's definitely bigger than Dominic and Ray. And, you know, but he also clearly shows that like he takes it seriously, that like he doesn't seem like someone that they just went like, here, like, let me show you how to take a bump, and they did it a couple times, and then he got in the ring and they kind of rehearsed, they went over. Like he seems like someone that I think trained to wrestle, and all more power to him. Regardless of what you think about him personally, like that's a whole other thing. But you know, he at least came off like someone who showed respect to the business in terms of the effort he put in to the fact that he was going to be wrestling at WrestleMania. And not everybody does that. So more power to him.
Agreed. I've seen a lot of celebrities come in and it's a no-go. And then you have, I mean, just last year and this year, you had 2 celebrities come in and did amazing. I mean, Johnny Knoxville is a whole other story, right?
Well, yeah. And then see, like, I know people that loved that match. Like loved that match. They were like, "Did you see Johnny Knoxville versus Sammy? That was like my favorite thing." And then there are people that, you know, are like, "This is the worst thing that's ever happened." You know, I get both sides. You know, like I'm someone who's able to step back and watch a PWG show or a kaiju big battle show. If you've never seen that, you know, that's wrestling, you know, like, wow, you know, but I love that. But to me, those kinds of shows at least are consistent. Like if you go to a show where everyone's dressed up like a monster in a suit, like you're not going to be taking that seriously. Like they're not trying to be taken seriously. Mm-hmm. And even though WrestleMania was obviously its own show, that whole segment was not trying to be anything other than what it was, you know? So it's like, what did you expect it to be? It's not like, you know, it would have been worse, I think, if Johnny Knoxville went in there and tried to catch can style wrestle with Sami Zayn and then looked great, you know? Like, I'd rather him bring out a giant mousetrap and Wee Man and stuff like that. I mean, that's ridiculous, and you can argue that it's stupid or dumb, but it's like, but it was fun, you know? And they let it be fun, you know?
Yeah, I think people sometimes just take things a little too seriously, and as fans, they start voicing their opinion and like, you know, this. And it's like it's a long show. It's got to be entertaining. You're not going to see. Not every match is going to be the greatest match. You know what I mean? Like, you got to put on a whole show, and there's a lot that goes into that. And you know, you being in the business, I mean, you know that, you know, firsthand.
Yeah.
Like,
for sure. Man. We you know, we often at Wildcat we'll have intermissions to give people a break, which is the beauty of when you're not running something live, you know. But when I'm working Hurricane Pro or New Texas and we're running like a live stream on either IWTV or Title Match or whatever it is, they you can't, you know, there's no ad breaks and things like that, so you have to keep the momentum going, and that's part of the what you have to try to work out when you're putting a show together is like thinking about those kinds of things. Like what goes on in the middle is important. What happens first is almost just as important. I get very frustrated with AEW because they put their best thing on first. Mm-hmm. And I'm always like, it's like almost every show, the story I hear, even from people that love the show, is at the end, crowd's so quiet because they're so tired and they're so worn out. It's like, well, yeah, like,
because they started off
it's exhausting. You have to have matches, like you have a banger, and then you have a match, and it feels like, you know, NXT was doing that with takeovers too, where like it's just non-stop main event match after main event match after main event match, and that's great if you're someone who's super into it and super like you have the energy to pay attention. But like, you know, I was in the arena when Shawn Michaels and Undertaker wrestled. And I thought, man, I'm done. And Edge, and no one talks about this part, is that Edge, Big Show, and John Cena followed that, and the crowd was dead. But then they kind of got their energy up, so they would have been good for Triple H versus Orton, but what they don't ever talk about is that right before Orton and Triple H, they did the Hall of Fame presentation with Stone Cold Steve Austin, who rode his ATV to the ring and celebrated drinking beers with the crowd. Like, it's like, yeah, we had some energy left, and then we just spent the rest of it on Stone Cold. Like, and then they did Triple H versus Orton, so they had no chance, you know. Like, and it was a fine match, but like it was just, you know, the crowd only has so much. At WrestleMania 33, Pitbull did some song with Flo Rida, and a lot of people complained about that, and I complained about it too. But not that they were there. I actually liked that Red Light song for WrestleMania, and I thought they were fine as like kind of a break. But they did that break like 4 hours into the show. It's like, you need to move that early. Like, don't do that, you know, like, don't have 10 matches and then give me Pitbull. Like, you know, like, give me a break. Like, it's like, it happened. It's like, I'm still tired though. Like, you know, now we're going to do Roman versus Undertaker. It's like, okay. You know. But,
well, you know. I was, you know, to kind of show my age, I was at WrestleMania 18 and saw Rock versus Hogan, which to me, hands down, is I don't care what anyone says, hands down is the greatest match in the history of WrestleMania.
Yeah.
That wasn't the last match of the night.
No, it was not.
and the crowd, I sat 5th row on the floor at Skydome in Toronto and saw that match. I can watch that match over and over, over and over. That is the greatest match ever in WrestleMania. But Jericho and Triple H wrestled for the belt after that. So it was like, to follow, I don't think anyone knew what to expect from that match, Hogan and The Rock. You know, it was like the best in-ring storytelling, everything about it. From a wrestling standpoint, not the best, but I mean, it was like two of the best ever going at it, and the way the crowd turned on The Rock, and I mean everything about that match. I mean, it zapped all your energy out afterwards. There was nothing.
It was such a well. First, it was in Canada, right? Which always has there's such a. I think it's partially because they don't tour there as much as they tour here. So there's the same thing when they do the UK shows. Like there's a fever that there's a higher energy when WWE goes out of the country.
Right.
And Canada, for whatever reason, is such a rich wrestling, you know, fandom, especially in Toronto. You know, and there's so many great wrestlers that have come from Canada that they have that energy, and then they also are that snarky crowd where they like to cheer for the bad guys and boo the good guys. So that energy was already there for Hogan and Rock to have kind of this weird dynamic. But when you also think about it, this is Hogan's first WrestleMania since, I believe, WrestleMania 9.
Yeah, right.
Right, where he beats Yokozuna after the powder, and you know, and everyone booed him out of the building. But like this sense, which Hogan is what made the wrestling boom. Right, he was the biggest wrestling superstar ever in the '80s, and a bunch of kids looked up to Hogan. But then those kids turn into preteens, and they're like, "I'm kind of over Hogan, right? I'm over Hogan," and then they become teenagers. And they're like, nah, I really don't like Hogan. And Hogan's like, okay. So Hogan turns heel in NWO, right? They're like, okay, now he's cool. Then he comes back to the WWE. Yeah. So you've got this weird dynamic of being this figure who you haven't seen, even though you've seen him the whole time because he's in WCW. It's a homecoming. It's like, this was my childhood hero.
Right.
That's now here, and I'm older. And I got to get out all of my feelings and boo him, and like we dump on him when he eliminated Sid and he turned heel. So he already gave us the kind of like cathartic, like, okay, so we're cool. And now he's back. And it's like, dude, he was my favorite. So there's like, I mean, like one of my favorite, like, I don't even need to watch that match. Just that opening tie up where Hogan like throws off the Rock and flexes like 2 or 3 times is the best thing ever. Because it's just this unique, like, there's no other scenario where you see the crowd react that way, because it's all those layers we just talked about all happening at once. But just that energy of like, he does it and he kind of looks at the crowd like, who's the man? They're like, you're the man. Like, you know, like, we freaking love you. And it's just so weird. And Rock's face is so genuine. It was like, what is happening right now?
Right.
Like
Totally
I can handle being booed. Like I've been booed out of the last couple WrestleManias.
Right.
This is not the same. Like it's not just that. Like people compared the Cena Triple H thing a few years later to that same kind of dynamic. And it was in the sense that the heroic good guy was not the one the crowd wanted. And that ended up, no one talks about that anymore because that became John Cena's MO for the rest of his career, you know, and like the one night stand match with RVD trumps it. But it's not that was more about people were crapping on Cena and cheering on Triple H. They were doing that with Rock Hogan too, but it's so much more that idea of like you're a kid and you have a hero and then you get over your hero and then he comes back and you've had time to kind of, now you're older and you're like, man, I remember when I was a kid. I love this guy.
Watch the match right now after the show. Just talking.
Right? Yeah.
Liz,
so great.
I'm gonna watch it too.
Have you never seen that match, Liz?
I don't think I've seen it. No.
WrestleMania 18 Rock versus Hogan is hands down the greatest match ever.
It's weird, like they built. If you think about comparing it to like Rock and Cena was built up for a year, right? The Hogan Rock match was made like 3 or 4 weeks before the show.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy to think about how little time they had to build up that match, and they didn't even need that much time, you know, because the NWO, and then it's also the first time Hogan he's in the NWO. They're doing the angle where you know Vince is in charge, but so is Ric Flair. So Vince doesn't want Ric Flair to have his company, so he is going to kill his creation with it. That's one of my favorite promos ever, where he's looking in the mirror and he turns around in his chair and it says NWO in the back. Yeah.
Man, Sammy, I could talk wrestling with you all day. All night.
I know. I'm sorry. I know I ramble a lot. I know I can talk a lot about, you know.
Hey man, this is a show. You got to fill time, and
right? That's the idea.
I'm eating it up. I love talking wrestling, man. I wish our show we could be like Stern and go 4 hours, 5 hours, but I think we would lose people after a while. But
probably.
Sammy, always great to have you on the show, man. Would love to have you on before the Wildcat show at the end of June.
That would be great.
Quick, tell our audience where we could find you. Plug Wildcat one more time.
Sure, So my name is Sammy Kiss. You can find me on all social media, usually at the Sammy Kiss, _Sammy_Kiss on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Also follow Wildcat Sports. That's Wildcat with a K. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook as well. Our next show again is on June 25th. It's going to be at Southport Hall in Jefferson, Louisiana. So if you're in the area, or even if you're not, I mean, like I would highly recommend coming because nobody does these shows like that. But if you're in Texas, I also do commentary for Title Match Network and Hurricane Pro, who's having a show in Beaumont on May 14th. And New Texas Pro is doing a show in Houston on May 21st. So I got a lot of stuff coming up. Oh, and Reality Wrestling is doing their Sherry Martel tournament next Saturday. It's going to be at Booker T's school in Houston. It's a all women's tournament in honor of Sherry Martel, who was the manager for Booker and Stevie Ray in WCW Harlem Heat.
Sensational Sherry.
Yeah, Sensational Sherry. So that was the show that was supposed to take place during WrestleMania weekend, but got changed. So we're finally able to do that show. So I'm very much looking forward to that. So yeah, I got so much lined up. You know, I'm glad I was able to come on here. So it's great. I'm happy to be busy. I'm glad to be working so much in Texas and be able to have Wildcat coming back. But it's nice to have some downtime and get a chance to talk about wrestling with you guys. Because like I said, it's nice to be able to actually enjoy talking about wrestling, this thing that we all love so much. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Sammy. We could chat with you all day, man. Hey, I am your host, Tony Twist. Sammy, hang tight for a second after the show goes off. And this is All Things Wrestling. Sammy's All Things Wrestling. Heel Liz, my co-host. Thank you, darling. And we are out of here.